It's time for the Chapter and Chatter Cafe with Camden County Library District Director, Professor Jim Paisley. Hey, and good morning. We are back again for another edition of the Chapter and Chatter Cafe. KB here alongside my good friend, the one and only Professor Jim Paisley. Good to see you again.
How you doing?
I'm doing very well, very well. Hey, we want to start things off, as always, with a huge host of thank yous. A lot of people that have made this possible. Of course, the great library staff here.
Absolutely. Couldn't do it without them.
We've got our technical crew, Mark Massey and Coley Creech,
Yes.
behind the scenes over there running the cameras. We've got a nice bunch of folks in here this morning that have come to visit us and maybe get a little insight on our topic. We've got some friends we want to thank as well. SRG Financial Advisors, thanks to Bill, Janice, and Christopher Lacasse, along with Dan Garrett and the great staff that they have available there. Also, a big thank you to Lake TV for providing us with the intro to our show today. And thank you if you are watching. We always invite folks to come by the library when we do these. We actually do these shows about, every 2 weeks?
2 weeks, yep.
And so we'll have another one coming up in 2 weeks. So if you missed this show, you wanted to be here live to maybe talk directly to the professor after we're done, we will have a Q&A session. We've got hopefully some cards to pass out to our patrons that are in our studio audience here this morning. And if they have any questions on our topic at hand, well, we'll address those questions and try to give them the best answer possible. Interesting topic to kind of kick things off this morning, Russia and Ukraine, or Ukraine and Russia, however you want to look at it.
However you want to look at it.
I think that it has been probably one of the biggest points of contention that we've talked about in a long time. But we've seen a lot of things happen over in especially Eastern Europe with Russia, Ukraine, some of the surrounding countries, states, if you will. Mm-hmm. And this has made for some very interesting fodder. But I think one of the most interesting points that I was able to come away with after reading your notes was how closely we as citizens of the United States need to watch this sort of thing and keep a very, very close eye on it, because we don't think, based on the way our country has been set up, how our country was originally established by the forefathers, but I think with the flip of a switch, there's some things that could almost start taking place here.
Exactly, and that's that's one of the most interesting things about the whole scenario that we're seeing play out there is we're in our infancy as a country,
right?
And the history of this whole area. I mean, I'm going to take you all the way back to 11th century. How's that? I know we only have so much time, but the interesting thing here is the fact that these people have been dealing with these conflicts for a long, long time. And I thought it would be kind of interesting first to talk about the current situation and how we got into this conflict, and then I'm going to give you a little history lesson that'll help, hopefully, clarify for you what this is all about. Why are these people, in this huge conflict?
And before we get to the professor's history lesson today, I want to reiterate to folks, our whole purpose of the Chapter and Chatter Cafe is to really promote the Camden County Library District, because there are a lot of amazing things that are going on here. So we thought, with the new director being a history professor, it might make sense for us to utilize the tools that are available in all of your Camden County libraries, and there are quite a number of them throughout Camden County. The things that are here in Camdenton or Osage Beach or maybe Richland or Stoutland or wherever, all of this information can be obtained through the use of the facilities and various other things that are available at various Camden County libraries throughout this great county that we live in. And so we have this great platform and this great idea to take history and make it the kind of the focus, but at the same point, allowing you to see what's available in the Camden County Library District by just talking about things like Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, well, and as you and I have talked over the years, it's one thing to watch the talking heads on TV, but it's another thing, to be able to turn around and do your own research. And, I'm in heaven right now because I'm in the library, and the nice thing about it is that you know, hats off to Karen here, the branch manager in Camdenton, and to all of my branch managers. What we're doing is I'm sharing my notes with the staff at each of our 6 libraries, and they're pulling from the stacks all the resources that we have for the information that's here in what you're going to hear about today. So when I talk about Nikita Khrushchev, or we talk about the foundation of Kievan Russia, these basic things, we have all the resources you need right here, and each one of the libraries has taken the time to pull those resources, and they'll have them right there as you come in the front door of your local library. All the things that you might want to, you know, that piqued your interest today, you can go look it up, and we've got it right here. We have great display even here at this library right now with books and all sorts of audio books, videos, everything you could possibly think of that pertains to the show.
And I think it's important for people to realize and understand what is available at your local library, certainly throughout the Camden County Library District. There are plenty of things. And again, we stress the fact that you need to maybe do some of your own research. Don't necessarily always focus on things that you hear in the media. Good Lord knows that the media, in their infinite wisdom, has decided to take a particular topic in one direction or another. And I remember there was one group that used to call themselves Fair and Balanced, but yes. I think maybe even they like to lean one way or the other. Do your own research, and that way you can better inform yourself, so when you hear them talk about certain things, obviously that's the litmus test that you can put before the media in terms of, is this really true or maybe not so much?
I'm hoping the next time you go to the coffee shop, people will come up to you and say, have you been to the library? Because you're going to be the experts, right?
Right on.
So you want to dive into this?
Let's do it.
Let's do it, all right? So how do we get to where we are today? Well, all the way back in March of 2014, Russian President Vladimir Putin, we all know who that guy is, he received authorization from the Russian parliament. I think that's kind of interesting, received authorization. He's in charge, right?
They have to make it look good, make it sound good.
But they decided to deploy troops to the area of the Ukraine. Now, these troops, when they got there, they came to the Crimea. It's a little peninsula that sticks down there into the adjoining area to Ukraine, and that's where they initially sent their troops. Now, basically what happened on March the 6th of 2014, the Crimean Parliament got together, and it had been part of the Ukrainian territory, you know, through the period after the fall of the Russian Empire. And basically they decided that they wanted to join up with Russia. So here Crimea had been part of Ukraine. They decided now that they want to be part of Russia. And so they decided that they were going to have a referendum. They were going to have a vote amongst the people to decide. Now, March 15th, what happened is that the UN Security Council was watching all of this, and they're saying, uh-oh, we're going to have some problems down in this area. And they said, hey, you folks down there, the last thing you want to do is join up with Russia. You know, we really, you know, we like kind of how things are right now, and this will destabilize the area if the Crimean Peninsula, in particular a place called Sevastopol, it's, you know, a big port, if this falls into the hands of the Russians, then we're going to have some problems. And so they said, whatever you do, folks, don't vote for this thing. You don't want to be a part of Russia. Now, here's where we run into a real snag. And this, you know, I'm going to deviate here a couple of times to try and explain some of the things that the media throws at you, and you scratch your head and wonder, what was that all about? Well, the UN Security Council. Now, this is important, not just for this area, but for everything you're seeing right now throughout the world with the Middle East, China, Korea, all of it. The UN Security Council is this group that comes together, there's 5 of them, and they make all the major decisions for the UN when it comes to conflict. Now, the way it was originally set up is that any one of the 5 members has veto power, okay? So you can get everybody together, all 5 of them, and everybody's saying, you know, everything's going well, but one person in the room can veto this and it's done. All decisions of the UN Security Council have to be unanimous. Everybody has to agree.
Good luck.
And you think, okay, all right, so what's the problem? Well, here's the problem. The 5 members of the UN Security Council, is China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. China and Russia are on that council. Now, can you imagine, getting this group together and finding something that they could all agree on? Not going to happen.
Right color for the tablecloth?
Yes. I mean, they can't decide what to have for lunch.
What dinnerware to use?
Right, exactly. And these guys are the ones that are calling the shots. Now, the reason it's those 5 is because those were the 5 great powers that were the victors in World War II. So when they formed the United Nations, they took the big 5, put them together, and said, okay, you guys are going to have the Security Council, all right? Now, again, any one of them can block any resolution that the Security Council takes up. Now, based on these rules, you can see why it's so difficult to pass any kind of UN Security Council resolution. You hear about them talking about this when they talk about Iran with the development of nuclear resources, that sort of thing. Same thing. So the major powers are going to side with the people that they want to. And so it's almost impossible to get them all to agree on something. It also explains why Ukraine will probably never be accepted as part of the United Nations, because you're going to have Russia sitting there and saying, no, yet, it's not going to happen, right?
Right.
Okay? So back to our story. This referendum, this vote, allowing Crimea to join with Russia was held March the 16th of 2014. Now, it asked the people of these regions whether they wanted to join Russia as a federal subject or if they wanted to go back to being independent, okay, and be part of the Crimean Constitution and be part of Ukraine. Now, the election officials in Crimea announced 97% of the people voted to step away from Ukraine and join Russia. And everybody kind of looked at each other and said, did you vote that way? Well, bottom line is, people immediately started saying, I'm not real sure. I'm thinking this was a fair and balanced election, right?
I think we've heard that before.
Yes, exactly, And so basically the United States and the European Union immediately said, well, that vote was illegal. That was corrupt. Somebody was stuffing ballot boxes, right? Now, Russia, of course, said, hey, you wanted an election, they had one. There it is. The people of the Crimea want to join up and be part of Russia. So, they have quite the conundrum in front of them. Now, basically, the United States and the European Union said, well, we don't care. We're not going to recognize that election. We're not going to recognize the vote of the people in the Crimea to join up with Russia. Now, several days after the UN Security Council resolution was vetoed by Russia, the United States, or the United Nations General Assembly, voted by a vote of 100 to 11 in favor of a non-binding statement opposing Russia's annexation. So in other words, the Security Council got together and they said, we think that we should not recognize Russia taking over this territory. But Russia is a member of the council, and again, Russia says, "Niet, we're not going to do it." And so there you had it. Okay, so that puts us in this situation we're in now. Okay, now the hostilities started to escalate because basically Russia started sending troops in and saying, "Hey, the people have asked to be part of Russia, and we're going to come in and defend their right." And
they just can't find any of those people.
They can't find it. Right, exactly. Okay, and so what we saw happen is the foreign ministers of the EU and Russia and Ukraine and the US all got together and they held a meeting in Geneva saying, okay, listen, obviously we're going to have some big issues here. And basically what happened was there was a joint diplomatic statement in which the parties requested that everybody lay down their arms, just calm down, everything will be fine. Mm-hmm. Well, you know how that's worked out, right? It didn't. Everybody didn't calm down, especially Russia. Now, as this crisis in Ukraine started escalating, U.S. then Vice President Joe Biden, of all people, okay, Joe Biden promised that he would come in and support the Ukraine and stressed that the United States would not recognize Russia's annexation, okay? So we're coming in and telling, Russia, we don't care that the people in Crimea supposedly voted to become a part of Russia, and that we're going to help the people of Ukraine and Crimea to gain their independence again, okay? That makes sense?
One thing that intrigues me in all of this, in order to get what the Russians essentially wanted, did they offer, or I say did they offer, did they come up with something to at least make it look good to the rest of the world? Like, we're going to come in here, and this is why we're so interested in this annexation. This is why we feel this is necessary. We know it's a peninsula, we know it's a port, we know that the Russians have a lot to gain by annexing this, but did they at least make some sort of a play to the rest of the world to maybe, you know, put a little sugar in it, little icing on it to make it sweet and palatable for the rest of the world to understand?
You know, we're much better shape in better shape to manage this whole port area and all the movement of all the grain and everything. Because Ukraine, folks, is like our Kansas. Okay, it's the breadbasket of Europe, has been forever. And so the big issue was, who's going to control all that grain? I mean, they're exporting grain all over the world, basically. And in essence, Russia's saying, we're in a much better place to do that. Plus, we have the Navy that we can protect the ships that are transporting the grain. They threw their 2 cents in there, but, you know, bottom line is,
just curious.
UN Security Councils, no, we're not buying it.
No.
So here we have this conflict breaks out. Now, one of the interesting things here, well, let's go back to a little history. Now, the Ukraine, like I say, it's the breadbasket of Europe, okay? And so what happens here is it has been the largest and most powerful state in all of Europe from all the way back to the 10th century. The 10th century. This is, you know, like I say, it's like Kansas. Think of it as Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, where all the grain is grown. Great, right? Now, of all things, and most people don't realize this, Russia was actually wound up where we get the term Russia, is the folks who came in and took over this area to begin with were the Vikings.
Right.
The Vikings. These guys came from like Sweden. And of all things, they didn't sail around the oceans to get there. They came by way of the rivers. And they wound up coming down the Dnieper River, and here's all these folks there, you know, that are raising grain, and it's a pretty popular area. And these Vikings show up, you know, the guys with the hats, right? And they're saying, okay, guys, what's going on? And they said, well, you know, we're out exploring. We're looking for a place to live. And they had this guy by the name of Oleg. He was in charge. He's the top Viking. And the problem is that because Kiev, this area right around the Ukraine, was such a popular area for grain, for raising livestock and grain and everything else, it was a lot of people would like to have it. In particular, these Mongolian hordes and all the barbarians, they called them, sweeping through. And so the people there in Ukraine thought, hey, these guys look like they got their act together. Got the big shields and swords and the whole bit, and they're tough. And so let's see if we can get them to settle here and they can protect us. And so Oleg said, sure, this is as good a place as any. And so he makes his kingdom there. He starts ruling there from this area of what they call Kievan Russia. Now, the reason why it's called Russia is because the people who came from Scandinavia were called the Rus, R-U-S, and that's why they call them Russians today. They're Vikings, okay? And so Kievan Rus, this area where the Crimea and Ukraine is, now starts to expand. They've got their military from the Vikings, and they've got all this income coming from all the grain and everything. So they're doing great, all right? Now, the Ukrainian state itself was established during the 17th century after an uprising against the Poles. The Polish people had come down the Dnieper River as well. Now, despite continuous pressure from Moscow, who now is looking at this area and saying, hey, we'd like to have this part as part of Tsarist Russia. Now what happens is that the Ukraine says, hey, we want to be independent, and we've got the forces to do it, and so they were. Mm-hmm. For 100 years, Ukraine was totally independent. Now, during the latter part of the 18th century, what we saw is that most of the Ukrainian territory started to be absorbed by this huge Russian empire. Now, the Russians, like I say, this is a huge area. Russia, to grasp this, okay, I just traveled recently to Indianapolis, and it was a 1-hour time zone different. Mm-hmm. I'm still adjusting for an hour. Russia is 11 time zones. 11 time zones. Think about how big that place is, all right? So this massive empire now is interested in getting Ukraine, okay? And so what happens is that Ukraine is constantly finding itself fighting with Tsarist Russia, the Romanovs, okay? And following the collapse of Tsarist Russia, what we see happen, it collapsed in 1917. That's when the last Tsar wound up being ousted, the Romanov dynasty. Anastasia would be an interesting topic. Anastasia was the daughter of the last Tsar. This empire collapses, and what we saw come in its place is the regime of Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. We know him as Lenin. Okay? Lenin comes to power, all right? And what we see happen here is that once Lenin comes to power, he is basically going to rule with an iron fist. We all know this, all right? And so let's stop right there for a second, because this is another one of those things where the talking heads on TV, they look at each other and they scratch their heads. And I can remember distinctly one time when I was listening to the national news, and a guy said, today the president of Russia attempted to overthrow the president of the Soviet Union. And you could see he looked off the side of the, and he got, what did I just say? Right? Because he had no clue. And so let's take a second here and explain that, because it's a little confusing. When Lenin came to power, it was actually three people. It was Lenin and Stalin and Trotsky. But when they came to power, they came up with this great idea. They said, my God, this thing's 11 time zones. How do you manage something this big? And so they said, we're going to take it and divide it into states. And that way we can put our own crony in each state, and it'll be a little easier to manage. And so what they did is they took the country of Russia, this massive 11 time zone thing, and they created this Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Now, a Soviet, folks, in Russian simply means council. So it's a union of councils, okay? And they said 15 councils. So they created 15 states. And as you can see right here behind us here, you have this whole red area up at the top. That's Russia, okay? But all of these others, all the way around the outside, the perimeter, which, interestingly enough, is between them and Europe, these are the places you hear about on the news. You hear about Ukraine. You hear about Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. All of these, it's a huge territory. But like I say, Lenin and the boys said, let's divide it up. But they kept the largest state, that big red area with the one on it, that's Russia, okay? So the whole thing is the Soviet Union. The red area is one state. Think of it like Texas. It's just a massive state, okay? And so now that big area has, basically these other areas have equal footing with it. They all go to their parliament and are all represented. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So, like I say, then when people start to ask, say, Soviet Union and Russia ceased to exist as a country and now becomes a state of the Soviet Union. Make sense? Okay? Now, what happens here, we have this Soviet empire has been created under the communist rule, okay? Now, we come to the Ukrainian famine. Now, this is kind of interesting. What we saw happen is because the country, the Soviet Union, has control over Ukraine now. Ukraine just simply becomes a state in the Soviet Union, okay? What we see happen is they want to implement this whole concept of collectivization, okay? Everybody's equal, right? And the government from Moscow is going to run all 15 states, of which one is Ukraine. Ukraine has all the grain, they have all the sheep, they have all the cattle, and so now Ukraine, which has been independent, finds itself taking orders from a place that's almost 2,000 miles away. And they're saying, "Net, we don't want to take any of these orders from Moscow." Well, what happens is it creates something called the Holodomor. Okay? The Holodomor is basically a forced famine by the government of the Soviet Union. They went in there and said, here's the way it works. You're going to grow your crops, and then you're going to put them all in a government truck, and the truck is going to take it to a government warehouse. And at the government warehouse, they're going to take the grain and they're going to take it to a government grist mill, and they're going to grind it up, and they're going to take it to a government bakery, and they're going to make the bread, and then government trucks are going to distribute the bread to the people. Okay? Everything controlled by the government. Well, the people who are there in Ukraine are saying, wait a minute, so I'm putting all the effort in making all this stuff, and you're going to just come and take it, and I get one loaf of bread a week? You know, I don't think so. You know, I get a pound of meat and a loaf of bread, and every 6 months you're going to give me a new shirt. How does this work? You know, and I'm doing all the work on this. So they're not happy. So naturally, they're going to resist. And so when they decide to resist, the government cracks down on them. And they come in there and say, bottom line is you're going to give us your stuff or else. All right? Well, the Ukrainian people said, let's see what the or else is. Well, they found out. And literally, people started starving to death because they just sent in the Russian military and started confiscating all the equipment, confiscating the grain, just absolutely devastated these people. It's estimated that about 4 million Ukrainians died, okay, because of the resistance. They're just saying, you'll do it or you'll die. 13% of their population was wiped out by Lenin, okay? Now, what's interesting here, understand Ukraine is a country about the size of Texas. And it's there along the Black Sea. And like I say, they could export grain everywhere. But now everything they make goes to the government, all right? Now, Stalin and Lenin, they decide they're going to do this collectivization thing, all right? And everybody's equal, all right? But it didn't seem equal to the people of Ukraine.
Of course not.
Now, basically, these subsistence farmers, the people in Ukraine who were there doing just fine, having their livelihood and being able to sell their crops everywhere, they basically said, rather than let the government have this, we're going to turn around and we'll burn our crops. And that's what they did. They set fire to their fields. Said, rather than let you guys come and take it from us, we're just going to burn it. Okay? And they did that. Then they decided, well, we're also going to slaughter off all of our cattle and all of our pigs and our horses. You name it, we're going to wipe it all out, sheep and everything, all right? Rather than give it to Stalin and to Lenin. Now, in 1934, the kulaks, that's what they called them, the farmers, the kulaks, K-U-L-A-K-S, the kulaks killed 26.6 million cattle. Think about that. They went out and just slaughtered all their cattle and left them to rot in the fields rather than let Lenin and Stalin and these folks have these things, right? Then they went out and killed 63.4 million sheep rather than let Stalin have it, okay? So they turned around and said, I'll show them. So we burned the crops and we wiped out all the cattle, all the sheep, all the meat, and they all looked at each other and, yeah, we showed them. And then they looked at one another and go, you got anything to eat? No. Uh-oh.
Think of that commitment for just a moment. Think of it, of somebody making a decision or even floating something like that out there, and people agreeing with it.
Yeah.
All these animals that they've raised, all this grain that has been grown, is just wiped out.
Their livelihood.
In order to tell Russia and send a very obviously strong, clear message that you're not going to come in here and take what you want and distribute it. We worked for this. This is ours.
Yes.
We don't feel the need to have to do this. Everybody's equal across the board. Pilgrims tried that. It didn't work for them either.
No, it didn't.
And there were a lot of different groups and organizations that find that you get into a situation like this and you more or less find out who the strong links of the chain are and the weak links of the chain. And I think the weak links of the chain understand and realize that there will be other people out there that will do the work and provide, and maybe we don't have to work as hard. But at the same time, the most important thing is it's staggering. 26.6 million. Think of that. 63.4 million. Think of the amount of grain that was burned.
Yeah, well, and understand, you're also wiping out your breeding stock. I mean, this isn't, oh, we'll hold back to where we can build it back up again. No, we're done.
And apparently this was a philosophy that the whole most of Eastern Europe used, because during World War II, as the Germans advanced on Russia, what did the Russians do? They left them nothing.
Yes.
They burned it, they killed it, whatever.
Scorched earth policy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. You know,
Gee whiz.
I mean, that's some folks with some real commitment.
Yeah.
Right. Now, again, Stalin, who's in charge now, Lenin has since died. Stalin, he's sitting there saying, I want to transform all of this Ukrainian area into his idea of a modern proletarian socialist nation. And, you know, he said, even if I have to kill every man, woman, and child in Ukraine to get the land to be able to feed this entire nation, I'll do it, okay? Now, it didn't go very well, like I say. By the fall of 1932, around the time that Stalin's wife came out and objected to his policies on the way he was treating the Ukrainians, by that time, it became apparent that Ukraine's grain harvest was gone and that they were facing a real problem going into that fall. Now, one quick note here, Stalin's wife came out and opposed to what Stalin was doing. Said, you're killing millions of your own people. This is ridiculous. You need to back off of this whole thing. We're all gonna die if they quit producing grain and meat. And interestingly enough, he shushed her up. They were at having a dinner party at their home, and he shushed her up, and she went upstairs, and that night she committed suicide. Yeah, she died. You know, and everybody, oh, what a shame. You know.
All right. Well, now this is something I have to ask you as well. You did the air quotes.
Yes.
Committed suicide.
Yes. You know, in other words, you don't want to oppose Stalin, and I don't care who you are. You can be my wife. Bottom line, committed suicide. Now, what's interesting about this is that Stalin, you know, he kind of takes it, you know, like, okay, you know, she was wrong, and you know, I'm gonna miss her, but not a whole lot, right? Yeah.
There's plenty of women in Russia.
Exactly, you know. And so what we see happen is that there might still have been enough food to get through that winter, but Stalin then ordered what little they had to be confiscated as punishment for not meeting their quotas. He tells his KGB, if you will, to go down there and take everything. And they came down and literally took the Ukrainians' harvesters, their combines, all of their plows, everything, took it all away from them. Just said, okay. And then here they go. They're going door to door, seeing who's hoarding grain and livestock. Are they hiding them from him? And these guys come up, knock on the door, and kick the door in, and here they come. They're looking, all right? Now, millions of people, understand, are starving to death in St. Petersburg and Moscow as well, because there is no grain coming, all right? So as Stalin is cracking down on Ukraine, it's now having an impact on all the major cities throughout the Soviet Union as well. Now, Stalin takes to arresting tens of thousands of Ukrainians. He just comes down and arrests them right there, okay? And what's he do with them? He sends them off to Siberia. Okay, if you spoke out against Stalin, you're gone, dude. You know, and going to Siberia, that was a slow death, as opposed to just getting killed outright. And some of them, that's exactly what happened to them. But he realized, where are these people getting these ideas? You know, that they shouldn't be part of the great collectivization. And so what's he do? He goes after the teachers. Yes, the teachers and all the intellectuals. And he removed Ukrainian language books. Yes, he was one of the first book banners. He took away all of the Ukrainian language books from the schools and the libraries. Okay? Now, he also used grain shortfall as an excuse for even more anti-Ukrainian or Ukrainian oppression. And he, quote unquote, went after Ukrainian saboteurs. In other words, you're a saboteur if you come out and say, no, I'm not going to give this guy anything, and I'm not going to cooperate with the government, all right? And so now he even goes after the people saying you can't use the Ukrainian language anymore. You have to use the Russian language, all right? Now bear in mind, you were a farmer 2 years ago, doing well, everything's fine. Now they've come in there, they've confiscated your equipment, they've everything's gone, and now they're saying you're going tomorrow, KB, you're going to start speaking Russian. I want to watch that, by the way. I want to see them teach him Russian. So bottom line is, it was something else. Now, when the crop collectors, they called them, went out into the countryside, according to, U.S. even had a congressional commission looking into this, they used long wooden spikes, and they'd come into the people's homes and stick them into the floor. People had dirt floors, looking to see if people had a stash of grain they were hoarding, keeping for themselves, all right? And if they found something, you're gone, you disappeared, all right? The peasants accused of being hoarders typically were sent off to prisons. Sometimes the collectors didn't wait to inflict punishment, they just took them out and shot them right there. There was an example, 2 boys were caught hiding fish and frogs that they caught, and they were, keeping that so they'd have something to eat. And basically, they were taken before the officials there in that particular town. They were beaten, dragged out into a field with their hands tied and their mouths gagged, and they put them out in the field and left them there to suffocate and die for hiding a frog, okay? As the famine got worse, people tried to do everything they could to find food. Some of them died on the roadside trying to flee the area, but Stalin had cut down the borders, or shut down the borders so you couldn't flee. There was no place to go. So people now started eating their pets. They ate things like flowers and leaves and tree bark and roots. One woman supposedly ate a whole bunch of dried beans, and then after she ate them, it swelled up and killed her, after she ate the beans. So, I mean, people are desperate. They're dying literally by the millions, okay? Now, local citizens and officials pleaded for relief from Moscow, saying, okay, you win. But by that point, Stalin said, to heck with you. You dug your own grave here. You're going to have to just live in it, right? Now, by the summer of 1933, some of the collective farms had only 1/3 of their households left. 1/3. So 2/3 of the Ukrainian people have been wiped out, all right, by the Soviets. Now, with hardly anybody left to raise crops, Stalin's regime resettled Russian peasants from other parts of the Soviet Union and brought them in there and said, here's what you do. You go to this collectivized farm and you're going to work here now. Now, you didn't have a choice, by the way. Okay, you could have been in Estonia and then they'd pack a bag, you're gone, and off you went.
If you get people
Tomorrow
that
morning,
lucky.
you're in Ukraine. You didn't even know where it was, right? Now, basically, the Soviet Union, as we all know, eventually collapsed in 1991. And when that happened, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine became an independent nation again. All of our 15 states, when the Soviet Union went down, all of those 15 states became independent nations, okay? Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, all of them. And so the problem with it is that when I was under the Soviet command, when they were running everything, okay, Ukraine, they could make grain. Like I say, it's Kansas. But if they needed steel or if they needed any manufactured goods at all, those came from Estonia or Latvia. Basically, the entire system, the economic system, collapsed in on itself.
It makes all the sense in the world, because of the 15, the strongest would seemingly survive. And the other states would just kind of wallow until somebody came along to help them out, felt sorry for them. Maybe they got aid or relief from someone outside of this area.
Right.
You hope.
And the ones that are fighting for the independence, like Ukraine, they have grain. They have something they can sell on the open market and survive. The area around Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, that area, they have oil. So you're exactly right. You're dead on there, KB. The ones that had resources that they could sell on the open market, they're wanting their independence. But when you're up around Moscow, they got everything from the surrounding states. And so when the whole system collapsed, you got Moscow, a city of millions of people, where are they going to get their food? Because they were used to the government providing it for them. Well, now that whole system's collapsed, okay? Now, here's the last point I want to make for you, is that understand this happened for the people in Ukraine now, this happened to their grandparents. So there's a history there. And so the people in Ukraine, when they saw the Soviets coming into the Crimea and now pushing into the Ukraine, they're sitting there reflecting back on what happened the last time Ukraine was under the Soviet Union's rule. This time it's just going to be Russia, but it's still, bear in mind, that's the big country. So when you look at it today, I hope that our lesson has told us today is it'll help you better understand why the Ukrainians are so willing to fight to the death to try and keep from falling back under the control of this communist regime under Putin.
Well, I think it presents another interesting question, because any time that you see a government in a situation like this, certainly Ukraine, there have got to still be supporters of Russia in the Ukrainian government. And interestingly enough, I have a friend who turned me on to a gentleman. One day he was a banker. The next day he was a lieutenant of his own battalion of freedom fighters in Ukraine. And these people are everyday citizens that were given a crash course on how to use a firearm and other types of military equipment. And they go around and try to thwart the Russians' efforts wherever they can. They need money, and mainly they have firearms, they have ammunition. What they don't have is specialized equipment, high-tech equipment that they can use, night vision, things like that. So I learned all about these people, and recently I received a message from him on Facebook asking for any donations that, just pass the hat, basically, is what he was looking for, because they lost all their vehicles. Didn't lose any lives, but they lost all their vehicles. And so this is the degree that these people are willing to go in order to defend their country. And again, I don't think most of us even can fathom or understand that. And certainly when you go back and you talk about what people in Ukraine were willing to do in order to stop Russia, killing their cattle by the millions, killing their sheep by the millions, burning their grain. And as you mentioned, the breeding stock, it's all gone. There's nothing left, absolutely nothing left. And that is the type of stand that these people were willing to take. 2 young boys taken out and suffocated. I mean, it boggles the mind, it blows the mind, quite frankly, that something like this.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Because this is what it basically boils down to. Because understand, like I say, Russia is huge. The former Soviet Union, 11 time zones. Well, you're in one of these provinces out in the middle of nowhere. You don't know what's going on in the world. You have no clue. But all of a sudden you realize, I went up to the little store here and I didn't get my weekly ration of bread and I didn't get my weekly ration of meat. What happened? The government's gone. Nobody's supplying me anything. So now what you have, and you've brought another key point here. I can stand here and join in with the fight and support the Ukrainians, or if I support Russia and Putin, I can turn this back on to where every week I get my food. Because bear in mind, there are people now with the system collapsed throughout the Soviet Union, throughout Russia, that have nothing again. If I gave you, let me ask you, if I gave you a free apartment, free place to live, free food, free education, everything free. I'll even give you a job. There's no unemployment, there's no crime, there's nothing. Would you do it?
It'd be hard to pass
Yes.
on. It would be hard to pass on, but at the same time, freedom
Right.
versus...
There's the problem. With collectivization, everybody gets equal, all right? But now, give me your cell phone. Okay, you can't have that anymore because everybody's equal, all right? I mean, if you get a cell phone, everybody gets one. But I'm sorry, we can't afford that.
Right.
But I will give you a loaf of bread this week.
Okay.
Okay, and I will give you an apartment to live in. It's not a very nice apartment,
No.
but it's an apartment.
Yeah.
So there's the conundrum here.
And then you'll tell me what I'm going to be doing to make a living.
Yes, you're going to, unfortunately, I'm going to have to send you someplace where you're going to have to work in a steel mill. You're probably not going to like it, But, you
I
know.
don't know.
uh,
I'll be warm.
Well, and let's face
Be a
it.
good place to work in the winter.
There's not a whole lot of, there's no HR department if you have a complaint.
Oh.
No. Well, there is one, but you don't want to see how that results.
Diversity, inclusion, things like that.
Yes, does not
we
happen.
won't even,
Right,
that won't even
right.
come to the table.
Right. So, folks, it's a fascinating topic. Like I say, our libraries are waiting for you. We've got books set out for you. You know, and please contact your librarians when you're there. Talk to them. These are great people. Yeah, I mean, you can Google anything, but you're going to scratch your head. We've got people that can help you. We can point you in the right direction and help you to dive into this even more. And I was kidding with the staff because my problem is I keep going and going and going. I told them the whole story about Stalin had a stroke and fell on the floor, and they left him lay there for 3 days because everybody was scared to death of him. That's how he died. They'd open the door every day and look, and nope, still alive. Close the door. And so yeah, and that's how Nikita Khrushchev came to power. We have books laid out on that too. So please, by all means, if I've piqued your interest on the stories, go to your local library. We're waiting for you and be happy to help you. Okay?
I will say the amount of time that we've spent on this subject obviously doesn't do it justice. Sure. There's a lot more to it, and there's a lot more that you're going to find at various branches of your Camden County Library District. So this is going to be somewhat of an interesting transition, talking about Russia and now getting into learning about some of these other countries, other cities, and one of the things available through your Camden County Library District is the A to Z resources. And I think this is fascinating. Cool. And I would hope that more people would take advantage of it. These resources are great for doing research, especially if you plan on doing some traveling, whether it's for pleasure, whether it's for business. Know what to do, know what not to do, know what to say.
Know where to go and not go.
Things along those lines.
Right.
But one of the things that they have available here is a great resource called A to Z World Travel. Now, it is great for, if you're planning a little travel, you want to get out, you want to do maybe a little bit more leisurely pleasure traveling. You're going to go, you want to spend some time. You've always wanted to go to some particular country in the world. Well, you can do all of that. And this acts as an online travel guide. So it's really nice. What was that company that made the big thick? Was it Fodor's that made the big travel guides? Right. Fodors. Yeah. Maybe I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. But they have the big travel guide. Sure. Now, through A to Z World Travel, you can literally do everything that you would do by reading online, which is obviously more exciting. You can see more photos, you can see videos. I'm sure there's, an opportunity to even interact at some point where you can really watch these things and get more of an idea of what to expect. How many times have you gone on a vacation and somebody's told you, well, this is how this is, and do this, and make sure you do that. And when you get there, something's closed, something's gone,
right.
and you had no idea. I got some interesting stories about a trip I took where I showed up in the rental car place. It had closed a week before we got there. Nobody bothered to tell us. If you are enjoying these resources, you can learn more about, and I think one of the nice things, especially in this day and age when it comes to travel, people like to feel more like a local than a tourist. They want to go where the locals go, where they eat, where they hang out, the activities and various things that they do. I think that this is just a great resource for you to be able to do all of that. Plus, as you, if you're traveling and you check out A to Z World Travel, understand and realize 174 countries. 174 countries. Yeah. They've done their homework, they've done their legwork, and you can simply come in and utilize it here at the Camden branch, Osage Beach, all the other branches as well. From, as they say, Afghanistan to Zimbabwe, you can learn more about a country's business culture, business style, relationship building, business etiquette, which is important, or dive deeper into their demographics, government history, money, banking. I mean, you can literally take as much time as you need to learn all of this ahead of time.
This right here, this is part of one of the pages that pulls up, and this is the business thing. You're going to travel to that country and you're going there on business. They have all the different customs and what the culture's like. Some countries you don't shake hands. You do this or whatever. And there's the all kinds of different categories on this. I know it's hard to see here, but there's a section here on the meetings, negotiating, entertaining. What type of clothes should you wear in that area, in that country while you're there? Business titles, Your Holiness, Your Eminence, right? And then,
Your Holiness.
yeah, the culture, society, all of it's right there. So it's almost like going there. There's all these different categories that you can look up right here on this resource. It's fascinating.
Well, and I
Absolutely
wonder,
fascinating.
two thoughts on that. Number one, it helps so that you don't create an international incident and the State Department has to get involved and come to your rescue. And it also maybe might even make you want to rethink your trip. If there's some things you're not sure about, if there's some things that maybe you can't quite handle, you don't think you can pick up on all the customs, this would be a good opportunity to do your research well ahead of time before you sink the money into it, and then realize that well, I can get get some of your money back, but you're not going to get all of it back.
I pulled up the business section here,
Right.
and I typed in Ukraine. A little tidbit that it had in there is that if you go there, there's 3/4 of the population are ethnic Ukrainians, and 1/4 are ethnic Russians.
Mm-hmm.
So you might want to be careful, how you're discussing business. You walk in there and say, well, I think the Ukrainians are crazy, and you find out that 3/4 of the country is Ukrainians, you might have an issue. So, a little preparation kind of helps.
A little preparation goes a long way.
Right.
It avoids, as I said, international incidents. We want to invite you as well to check out other A to Z resources, A to Z Food America and A to Z World Food. Now, anybody who looks at me knows that I love food. And I know there are some shows on TV, Bizarre Foods being one of them,
Right.
where they have some interesting meals that they prepare
Right.
and some interesting ingredients they use. And so if you are not quite sure about a particular dish and you want to know everything that's in it, A to Z Food would be, in my opinion,
I looked at that
a
one.
huge
I
resource,
loved it because
a very valuable resource.
Ukraine, you love that place because they're kind of like we are here in the central part of the United States. A lot of stuff, breaded and gravy and that kind of stuff down in Ukraine. That's the place I want to go. I don't. These French places that have greens and a few little things with a little dollop on there. That's not for me. Send me where they deep fry it and pour gravy on it.
And they give you a bib to eat it.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they know you're going to get some on you.
And chicken Kiev, right?
Very
so
good.
There you go. Right. So kind of neat.
Also, another thing, if you're always on the go, you can take the resources and so much more with you. Download the mobile app, which is nice to have because you're not sitting there paging through a book, thumbing through a book, trying to figure out what you're doing while you're on the fly.
Right.
You've got the app available to you. Again, it says here, no library card is needed to access the A to Z resources, which I think is very important. Jim, talk a little bit about this wonderful lady that is going to be celebrating her 108th birthday this Friday.
Yes. We're going to have basically we're doing what we call a DEAR campaign. It's basically drop everything and read. Right. And in essence, we're going to hold a special story time this week, April the 12th. And what it's about is, we're going to have story time for the kids, and we are going to honor Beverly Cleary. Now, she would have been 108 this week. Unfortunately, passed away back in 2021, but most people don't recognize the name. But she was probably one of the premier children's book authors in the United States. The list of accolades for this woman are fascinating. She won the National Medal of Arts. The Library of Congress designated her as a living legend. She's a children's author, wrote just tons and tons of books for kids. And she started out as a librarian and realized there weren't enough resources for kids. Okay, and this is in the early 1900s. And she realized somebody needs to get great stories for kids. And sure enough, she started writing books then. And one of her biggest characters in her books was a fellow by the name of Henry Huggins. Okay, now I'm pretty old, and I can remember reading some of these books way back when. But yeah, she really was one of those that's just a legend in children's books and a great American author. So we thought it would be nice to honor her by having a story time at 3:30 p.m. Coming April the 12th, this Friday.
That's tomorrow.
Yes.
Tomorrow, sir, at the Osage Beach Library. You can celebrate Native American culture at the Camdenton Library right here where we're at by learning about the powwow on Saturday, April the 13th. The American Indian Culture Center of Springfield presenting traditional dances that may be found at powwows and teach how Native American children participate in their heritage, which is very important these days. Kids remembering and celebrating and being exposed to their heritage allows that to live on. Kids will have a chance to learn some dance steps from powwow Princess Nizoni Falcon while honoring the strong tradition of Native people. If you can believe this, and I'll have to dig out the pictures, I have a full Indian dance costume, bustles, goats, headdress, breastplate. I used to do that. I did that, and I'd actually danced with the Indians down in Oklahoma, the Native Americans down in Oklahoma. It was when I was in scouting, which was an amazing. Well, you'd have to, because that's the only way you're going to do it. Also, are you looking to indulge your crafty side? They invite you to join the folks at the Stoutland Library coming up on Friday, April the 16th at 5:30 for a fun and exciting evening with Dan Rivera, a local artist returning to the library to teach new painting techniques. Have you ever thought about painting?
Believe it or not, in another life, my first degree
You were Vincent van Gogh?
I was a commercial artist.
You were a commercial artist?
Yes.
That's right, you were.
I did a lot of artwork, yeah. You know, but usually what I've found is that you're not famous until after you die, so I've still got hope.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I'll be waiting intently for the biography to come out. Unfortunately, fortunately, I know most of it. The Camdenton Library hosting an after-hours Nerf battle for ages 7 to 11 on Friday the 26th of April from 6 until 9. Registration is required for the event. Rules and registration can be found on the calendar of events. The link is in the comments. If you'd like to check out the library's website, it is ccld.us. Go there and take some energy out of the kids for the day. Friday, that's a perfect time to do it. Again, ages 7 to 11 on April the 26th from 6 until 9. It also says if you're wanting to find mom a one-of-the-kind handcrafted gift this Mother's Day, be sure to stop in the Osage Beach Library's Mother's Day Makers Market Bazaar on Saturday, April 27th from 10 to 2. They'll have local craft vendors there selling their unique wares, from stained glass jewelry to t-shirts, handcrafted bags. There is definitely something for everyone. And if you do anything for Mother's Day for mom, don't buy her a vacuum or an iron or a washer and dryer because it'll more than likely be headed for your general vicinity when she opens it up.
I bought my wife a rake one time. That didn't go very well.
No.
But, you know,
that would,
I was thinking of her.
That would explain the scar on your forehead. Finally, you won't want to miss this. The Friends of the Lake of the Ozarks returning to the Camdenton Library on Saturday, April 27th at 1 p.m. for a free acoustic session.
And this is the Blues Society.
This is the Blues Society, Lake of the Ozarks Blues Society. I also,
right here behind you.
There they are.
Yeah.
How you doing, folks? Yeah. Wanted to mention again quickly while we still have a minute or so left that the big kickoff in June for the big reading program that's going to take place. Check out the CCLD.us website to sign up for that and get that all taken care of. That's going to be a fun day, a fun event, and we've got lots going on. Jim, we've run it up against the clock yet again. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks to our technical crew, Coley and Mark. Vicki, thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for coming out. Thanks to SRG Financial Advisors. Thank you so much to the wonderful folks with Lake TV for helping us with our intro. We thank you. Tell your friends. Tell your neighbors. Jim, what's the next show and when?
Next show, Israel and Hamas.
Oh.
And it'll be in 2 weeks.
2 weeks from now, we'll see you right back here. Make sure you check it out. As I said, share it, tell your friends, tell your neighbors. And we thank you so very much for joining us right here with the Chapter and Chatter Cafe, live on location from the Camdenton branch of the Camden County Library District. Thank you so much, folks. God bless, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.